The thunder cracked overhead as Zara Jones ducked into the ramshackle saloon in Willow Creek, clutching her sodden shawl tighter around her shoulders, her two exhausted children huddled against her skirts. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the Arizona Territory had quickly turned to dust when her husband's fever took him just 3 weeks after they'd arrived. Now, with nothing but $23 to her name and 2 hungry mouths to feed, she had nowhere left to run. The saloon fell silent as she entered, the piano player's fingers freezing mid-note. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to assess the bedraggled woman and her children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6, both with their mother's honey-colored hair and wide, frightened eyes. "We don't serve women and children here," the bartender called out, his voice gruff but not unkind. Zara straightened her spine. "I'm not here for drinks, I'm looking for work." A man in the corner booth let out a low whistle, and Zara felt her cheeks burn. Before she could respond, a deep voice cut through the murmurs. "That's enough, gentlemen." The crowd parted to reveal a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes. His dark hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and a jagged scar ran along his jawline. His clothes were dusty, but well kept, the mark of a man who took pride in himself despite the harsh realities of frontier life. "Mason Irwin," he said simply, tipping his hat. "I own the cattle ranch outside town. Heard Mrs. Peterson at the general store needs help with bookkeeping." His eyes fell to the children, and those two looked like they could use some hot food. Before Zara could respond, her son stepped forward protectively. "We don't need charity, mister," Mason's lips twitched. "Wasn't offering any, young man. Your mother looks capable enough." He turned to leave, then paused. "The Peterson place has rooms above the store, might be worth asking about." With that, he was gone, the saloon doors swinging in his wake. Zara didn't know it then, but that brief encounter would change the course of her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning, Zara found herself standing before Mrs. Peterson, a plump, cheerful woman with shrewd eyes who ran the only general store in Willow Creek. "So you can read, write, and do figures?" Mrs. Peterson asked, studying Zara over the rim of her spectacles. "Yes, madam." "My father was a schoolteacher back in Philadelphia. He insisted I learn properly." Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. "Most women out here can barely sign their names. I could use the help, especially with keeping the books. My eyes aren't what they used to be." She glanced at Thomas and Emma, who stood quietly beside their mother. "The children can attend the schoolhouse during the day, teachers strict but fair." Relief washed over Zara. "And the rooms upstairs, $5 a month, includes water and coal for the stove, Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. "Lost your husband recently, didn't you?" Zara nodded, swallowing hard. "Fever took him 3 weeks ago." "Well, you'll find no judgment here. This territory's hard on everyone. Least I can do is help a widow with little ones." She handed Zara a key. "Start tomorrow at dawn. Pays fare $2 a week plus store credit." That night, in the modest but clean rooms above the store, Zara tucked her children into the single bed they would share. "Are we staying here now, Mama?" Emma asked, her small fingers tracing Zara's palm. "For a while, sweetheart." Mrs. Peterson gave Mama work. Thomas frowned, his young face serious beyond his years. "That man from the saloon, the one with the scar, he helped us. He just pointed us in the right direction, Thomas. That's all. Pa said we should never take help from strangers." Zara smoothed his hair. "Sometimes strangers become friends, Thomas. Now sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." As her children drifted off, Zara stood by the window, watching the distant lights of Mason Irwin's ranch flicker against the vast darkness of the frontier night, wondering why a man who seemed so formidable had shown such unexpected kindness. Weeks passed, and Zara settled into her new life. The work at the store was demanding but satisfying. Mrs. Peterson was a fair employer, and the townspeople gradually accepted Zara's presence. Some of the women still whispered behind their hands. A young widow with 2 children was always subject to speculation, but Zara held her head high. She saw Mason Irwin occasionally. He would ride into town for supplies, nod politely, and exchange a few words about the weather or the children. There was something about his quiet strength that drew her. though she scolded herself for such thoughts. A widow with 2 young children had no business entertaining romantic notions. One sweltering August afternoon, as Zara was closing the store, Thomas came running in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Irwin's bringing in a herd tomorrow. All the boys are going to watch. Can I go?" Zara hesitated. "Who's supervising this excursion?" "Mr. Wilson, the school teacher. He says it's educational." Zara smiled at her son's enthusiasm. Thomas had been withdrawn since his father's death, and this was the first time she'd seen genuine excitement in his eyes. "All right, but you stay with Mr. Wilson the entire time, understand?" Thomas's face lit up. "Yes, madam." The next day, as Zara was shelving new inventory, a commotion outside drew her attention. She stepped onto the boardwalk to see riders galloping into town, one of them carrying a small figure before him. Her heart stopped. Thomas, Mason Irwin dismounted in one fluid motion, gently cradling her unconscious son. Snake spooked his horse. He took a fall. Doctors on his way. The next hours were a blur. Dr. Harris arrived quickly, diagnosing a broken arm and a concussion, but assuring Zara that Thomas would recover. Throughout it all, Mason remained, his steady presence a comfort Zara hadn't realized she needed. As the sun set, with Thomas sleeping peacefully and Emma nestled beside him under Mrs. Peterson's watchful eye, Mason walked Zara outside for some air. "He's tough, your boy," Mason said, leaning against the porch railing. "Too tough for his own good sometimes." Zara's voice cracked. "I keep thinking if I'd lost him too." "But you didn't." Mason's voice was gentle. "Life out here is full of dangers, Zara. Can't shield them from everything." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her look up. The setting sun cast his face in golden light, softening the scar on his jaw. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing him back to me." Mason nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I should get back to the ranch. My foreman can only handle so much on his own." As he mounted his horse, Zara called out, "Mr. Irwin, Thomas's birthday is next Saturday. He'd be pleased if you join us for cake." Mason tipped his hat. "Wouldn't miss it, Mrs. Jones." The birthday celebration was modest, a small chocolate cake, Mrs. Peterson had helped bake, and a hand-carved wooden horse from Mr. Wilson. But Thomas's face when Mason arrived with a real leather, cowboy hat sized for a boy but made just like a man's was worth more than gold to Zara. "This is too fine a gift," Zara protested later as they watched the children play with some of the town's youngsters in the square. Mason shrugged. "Boy needs something to dream about." He paused. "He reminds me of myself at that age, serious, taking on too much responsibility." "You lost your parents young." "My father. Mother raised 4 of us on her own." His eyes clouded. "Taught me that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but how much you can endure and still keep moving forward. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." Mason's smile was rare and transformative. "She would have liked you." The autumn brought cooler weather and a rhythm to their lives. Mason began visiting the store more frequently, often bringing small gifts, fresh venison, wildflowers for Zara's table, stories for the children. Emma took to him immediately, climbing onto his lap to demand tales of his adventures. Thomas was more reserved, watching the growing closeness between Mason and his mother with wary eyes. One evening in late October, as Mason was helping Zara close the store, Thomas confronted him directly. "Are you sweet on my mama?" he demanded, hands on his hips in a posture so reminiscent of his father that Zara's heart ached. Mason set down the broom he'd been using and crouched to Thomas's level. "I respect your mama very much, son." "That's not what I asked," Thomas persisted. Mason's eyes flickered to Zara, who stood frozen by the counter. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." Thomas's chin jutted out. "My pa's only been gone 6 months." "Thomas," Zara gasped. Mason held up a hand. "It's all right, Zara," he turned back to Thomas. "Your pa was a brave man to bring his family out here for a better life. I'd never try to replace him, but I'd like to be your friend if you'll let me." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "I already got friends." "Fair enough," Mason stood, "but my offer stands." He nodded to Zara. "I'll see myself out." After Mason left, Zara sent Emma to prepare for bed, then sat Thomas down at the kitchen table. "That was very rude, Thomas." His lower lip trembled. "You're forgetting Pa." Zara's heart broke. "Oh, my sweet boy, I could never forget your father. He'll always be part of us." She took his small hands in hers. "But being lonely won't bring him back." "Are you lonely, Mama?" The question pierced her. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I have you and Emma. That's enough for me." Thomas looked down. "Mr. Irwin is nice to Emma, and he saved me from the snake." "Yes, he did. Does he make you smile, Mama?" Zara blinked back tears. "Yes, Thomas, he does." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Then I guess he can be my friend too." The winter of 1876 was harsh, with blizzards sweeping down from the north and temperatures plummeting to deadly lows. Mason worried constantly about Zara and the children in their rooms above the store, which, while sturdy, weren't built for the bitter cold. 2 days before Christmas, he rode into town through knee-deep snow, leading a packhorse laden with supplies. "Mason, what are you doing out in this?" Zara exclaimed, ushering him inside the store, which was empty of customers due to the weather. His face was red from the cold, ice crystals clinging to his beard. "Brought some extra blankets and provisions. Storm's getting worse." He stamped snow from his boots. "Where are the young uns?" "Upstairs. The school's been closed for 3 days now." Mason nodded, concern etched on his face. "Zara, I don't like the look of those clouds. This might be worse than anything we've seen yet." He hesitated. "I'd feel better if you and the children came to the ranch. It's built into the side of a hill, better protected. Got a root cellar full of food and enough firewood to last till spring." Zara bit her lip. "The store," Mrs. Peterson already headed to her sister's in Phoenix last week. "She'd want you safe." Before Zara could respond, the door banged open and Sheriff Taylor stepped in, snow swirling around him. "Mason, Mrs. Jones," he nodded. "Got word from up north. This storm's turned into a full blizzard. I'm advising everyone to shelter in place or move to sturdier buildings. The saloon and the church are taking folks in." Mason looked at Zara meaningfully. She nodded, decision made. "We'll need an hour to pack." Within 2 hours, they were on their way, the children bundled in furs Mason had brought, seated before him and his ranch hand on sturdy horses accustomed to harsh conditions. The journey that normally took an hour stretched to 3 as they battled the increasing snowfall and howling wind. The ranch house loomed out of the whiteness like a mirage, a sturdy 2-story structure of thick logs with a stone chimney from which smoke curled reassuringly. Light glowed from the windows, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Inside, warmth enveloped them. A fire roared in the massive stone hearth, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. A middle-aged woman with a kind face hurried forward. "Thank heavens you made it," she said, helping Emma out of her snow-encrusted coat. "I'm Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper. Let's get you all warmed up." The ranch house was larger than Zara had expected, with 4 bedrooms upstairs and comfortable, if simple, furnishings. Mason showed them to their rooms, one for Zara and Emma to share, and one for Thomas, though he insisted on staying with his sister and mother for the first night. As the blizzard raged outside, they gathered in the main room after dinner. Mrs. Caldwell had prepared hot chocolate for the children, and Mason produced a bottle of fine bourbon, pouring small glasses for himself and Zara. "To safe harbors," he toasted. Zara sipped the amber liquid, feeling it warm her from within. "I never properly thanked you for thinking of us." Mason's eyes reflected the firelight. "I've been thinking of little else these past months, Zara." The frankness of his statement caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Emma piped up from where she was playing with a wooden doll Mason had carved for her. "Mr. Mason, will you tell us a story? A Christmas one?" Mason smiled. "Well now, I'm not much for stories, but I do know one my mother used to tell about a Christmas during the war." As Mason spun his tale, Zara watched her children's faces, illuminated by firelight. Thomas had lost the wariness he usually wore around Mason and was listening intently, occasionally asking questions about the war. Emma had climbed onto Mason's lap as if she belonged there, her small head resting against his chest. A feeling of rightness settled over Zara. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt as though they were a family again. The storm lasted 3 days, during which time they fell into an easy routine. Mrs. Caldwell taught Zara to make sourdough bread, while Mason showed Thomas how to care for the horses in the barn. Emma followed Mrs. Caldwell everywhere, helping with the cooking and cleaning with the earnestness of a child eager to be useful on Christmas Eve. They exchanged simple gifts: hand-knitted scarves from Zara for Mason and Mrs. Caldwell, a whittled flute for Thomas, and a rag doll for Emma from Mason. The children presented Mason with a drawing they'd worked on in secret, showing all of them together in front of the ranch house. Later, after the children were asleep, Zara and Mason sat before the fire, a comfortable silence between them. "I haven't seen them this happy in a long time," Zara said softly. "Especially Thomas." Mason nodded. "Boys carrying a heavy load for someone so young, trying to be the man of the family, like someone else I know." Zara smiled. Mason's laugh was low. "Touché." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I have something for you. It's not much, but—" He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a silver locket, simple but beautifully crafted with delicate engravings of wildflowers. "Mason, it's lovely," she breathed. "Open it." Inside was a tiny painting of her children, rendered with surprising skill. "How? Had an artist passing through town do it from my description. Hope it's close enough." Tears pricked Zara's eyes. "It's perfect." She leaned forward impulsively and kissed his cheek. "Thank you." Mason caught her hand as she pulled away. "Zara, I need to say something." She waited, her heart suddenly pounding. "I've been alone a long time, never thought I'd want it any other way." His voice was rough with emotion. "But then you and those children came to town, and suddenly my house felt empty. My life felt empty." "Mason, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I know it's too soon. I know Thomas is still grieving his father. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. I love you, Zara Jones, and I love those children like they were my own." Zara's tears flowed freely now. "I don't know what to say." Mason squeezed her hand. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you have a home here for as long as you want it." The storm cleared on Christmas Day, revealing a transformed world of pristine white. Mason took the children sledding on a gentle slope behind the house, their laughter carrying on the clear, cold air. Zara watched from the porch, the locket warm against her skin, her heart full in a way she hadn't thought possible again. When they returned to town 3 days later, the rooms above the store felt smaller and colder than before. Thomas and Emma spoke constantly of the ranch, of the horses and Mrs. Caldwell's cookies, and the way Mason had taught them to identify animal tracks in the snow. January brought more storms, and February dragged on with bitter cold. Mason visited whenever he could, bringing supplies and staying for meals. Sometimes he would read to the children while Zara mended clothes or worked on the store's books. These quiet evenings became precious to all of them. As winter began to loosen its grip, Zara noticed Thomas spending more time with Mason, asking questions about ranching and riding. The wariness had been replaced by admiration, though Thomas still kept a certain distance, as if afraid to fully embrace the connection. One evening in early March, as Mason was preparing to leave after dinner, Thomas approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Irwin, could I come to the ranch sometime?" "To help with the horses?" Mason's face revealed his surprise and pleasure. "I'd like that, Thomas. How about this Saturday, if your mother agrees?" Zara nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Of course." That Saturday marked a turning point. Thomas returned from the ranch bursting with stories about the new foals, the cattle, and how Mason had let him ride his own horse, Thunderbolt. The next weekend, Emma insisted on coming too, and soon their Saturdays at the ranch became a regular occurrence. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers carpeting the hills around Willow Creek. The general store grew busier as travelers began moving through the territory again. Zara found herself looking forward to the weekends as much as her children did. One warm April evening, as they were walking back from a picnic by the creek on Mason's property, Emma ran ahead with Mrs. Caldwell, leaving Zara, Mason, and Thomas to follow at a slower pace. "Mason," Thomas said suddenly, using the man's first name for the first time. Do you ever get lonely out here? Mason glanced at Zara before answering. Sometimes, that's why I'm glad when you all visit. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. My friend Billy's mama got married again last month. To the blacksmith. I heard about that, Mason said carefully. Billy says it's good to have a man around for protection and such. Zara felt her face flush. Thomas, it's a fair point, Mason interrupted gently. A man can be useful for certain things. Thomas kicked at a stone. My pa was teaching me to shoot before he got sick, said every man should know how to protect his family. Your pa was right, Mason agreed. Would you like me to teach you when you're a bit older? Thomas's face lit up. Would you, if your mama says it's all right? Thomas looked at Zara pleadingly. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her son was reaching out to Mason in his own way, and the significance wasn't lost on her. As April turned to May, the dynamics between them shifted subtly. Mason began courting Zara, properly bringing flowers, taking her for rides around his property, stealing brief kisses when the children weren't looking. The townspeople noticed, of course. There were whispers, some disapproving of a widow moving on so quickly, others approving of the match with one of the territory's most prosperous ranchers. Zara paid them little mind. She was falling in love again, a possibility she had never imagined after the devastating loss of her husband. Mason was different, quieter, more weathered by life's hardships, but his steadiness and the gentle way he treated her children had worked their way into her heart. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset, Mason took her hand. Zara, there's something I need to ask you, her heart quickened. Yes, I've been thinking about the future, about us. He turned to face her fully. I want you and the children to move to the ranch permanently as my family. Zara's breath caught. Are you asking? I'm asking you to marry me, Zara Jones, to be my wife and let me be a father to Thomas and Emma. His blue eyes were earnest. I know I can never replace what you lost, but I promise to love you and those children with everything I have for as long as I live. Tears filled Zara's eyes. Mason, the porch door banged open and Thomas stood there, his young face flushed with anger. No, he shouted. You can't marry him, Mama, you can't. Before either adult could respond, Thomas ran down the steps and disappeared into the growing darkness. Thomas. Zara called, rising to her feet. Mason put a hand on her arm. I'll find him. Stay here with Emma. Mason found Thomas in the barn, huddled in an empty stall, knees drawn up to his chest. The boy's face was streaked with tears. Mind if I join you? Mason asked quietly. Thomas shrugged, not looking up. Mason settled beside him, leaving some space between them. Want to tell me what's troubling you? Thomas sniffled. If you marry Mama, you'll be my pa. Not to replace your real pa, Mason clarified, but yes, I'd be your stepfather. And we'd live here. That's the plan. Thomas picked at a loose thread on his pants. What if you get sick like Pa did? What if you leave too? Mason thought. There it was, the fear that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. Thomas, look at me. When the boy raised his tear-stained face, Mason continued gently. I can't promise I'll never get sick or that nothing bad will ever happen. Life doesn't work that way, especially out here. Then why? But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to stay with you and your Mama and Emma for a very long time, and that I'll make sure you know how to take care of them if something does happen to me. Thomas absorbed this, like teaching me to shoot and ride. And run the ranch, exactly like that. Mason hesitated, then asked, Can I tell you something I've never told anyone else? Curiosity flickered in Thomas's eyes. What? I was scared to love your Mama and you and Emma. You were, why? Mason sighed. Because loving people means you can lose them, and that hurts something fierce. I lost my pa in the war and my brother to typhoid, and for a long time I decided it was easier to be alone. Thomas nodded in understanding. That's what I was thinking too, but you know what I figured out. Mason continued. Being alone to avoid getting hurt is like never riding a horse because you might fall off. You miss out on all the good parts. A small smile tugged at Thomas's lips. And the good parts are pretty good. The best, Mason agreed. Your Mama's smile, Emma's stories. Watching you learn to rope a calf. He bumped Thomas's shoulder gently with his own. Family isn't about who's blood-related, Thomas. It's about who stays by your side when things get tough. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, he asked, if you marry Mama, what would I call you? Whatever feels right to you. Mason is fine, Sir works too. He winked, drawing a reluctant laugh from the boy. Some people go with Pa eventually, but that's entirely up to you. Thomas nodded slowly. I think Mama should marry you, but I'm still scared sometimes. That's all right. Being brave isn't about not being scared, it's about doing what needs doing anyway. Thomas stood up, brushing hay from his clothes. We should go back, Mama's probably worried. As they walked back to the house, Thomas tentatively slipped his hand into Mason's larger one. The simple gesture nearly undid the weathered rancher, who squeezed the small hand gently in response. Zara was pacing the porch when they returned, her face anxious until she saw them approaching hand in hand. Thomas Jason Jones, you scared me half to death, she scolded, though relief softened her words. Sorry, Mama. Thomas looked up at Mason, then back at his mother. I was scared, but Mason helped me understand some things. Oh, Zara raised an eyebrow. Thomas took a deep breath. I think you should marry him if you want to. Zara's eyes filled with tears as she knelt to embrace her son. Are you sure, sweetheart? Thomas nodded against her shoulder. He promises to teach me everything I need to know, and he pulled back to look at her. He makes you smile again. Zara looked up at Mason over her son's head, love and gratitude shining in her eyes. In that case, Mr. Irwin, I believe I have an answer for you. Mason helped Thomas up the porch steps, then turned to Zara expectantly. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Mason's face broke into a rare, full smile as he swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. Thomas watched, a mixture of emotions playing across his young face, but acceptance was winning out. The door opened and Emma appeared, rubbing sleepy eyes. What's happening? Thomas put an arm around his sister. Mason's going to be our new pa, he said, testing out the words. And we're moving to the ranch. Emma's face lit up. Really, forever and ever? Mason set Zara down and crouched to Emma's level. Forever and ever, little one, if that's all right with you. Emma threw her arms around his neck. Can I have a pony, a real one, just for me? The adults laughed, the tension broken. As they all moved inside, Zara caught Thomas watching Mason with Emma. There was still uncertainty in her son's eyes, but there was hope too. It was enough for now. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek. Most of the town attended, along with Mason's ranch hands and neighboring ranchers. Mrs. Peterson returned from Phoenix for the occasion, beaming with approval at the match she had indirectly facilitated. Emma was radiant as a flower girl, scattering wildflower petals down the aisle. Thomas, solemn in his new suit, stood beside Mason at the altar, holding the rings with careful dignity. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zara caught Thomas's eye over Mason's shoulder as they kissed. Her son gave her a small, brave smile that meant more to her than all the well wishes that followed. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and lanterns hanging from the branches. As twilight deepened, Mason led Zara in their first dance, their figures silhouetted against the fading light. Happy, Mrs. Irwin, he murmured against her hair. More than I thought possible, she answered truthfully. Though I'm still worried about Thomas, he's trying so hard. Mason nodded. He'll come around in his own time, can't rush healing. As the music changed, Thomas approached them hesitantly. May I dance with my mother? He asked with formal politeness. Mason bowed slightly. She's all yours, young man. As Mason stepped away, Zara knelt to her son's height. This is a very grown-up thing to do, Thomas. He squared his shoulders. I'm the man of the family, Mama, or I was. Confusion flickered in his eyes. You'll always be my first little man, she assured him, taking his hands. And now you have Mason to help you carry that responsibility. They swayed awkwardly to the music, Thomas concentrating hard on his steps. After a moment, he said, I think Pa would be okay with this. Zara's heart clenched. Why do you say that? Because he made me promise to take care of you and Emma before he died, and I tried, Mama, I really did. But it's hard. Oh, Thomas, Zara whispered, fighting tears, but now Mason can help, and Pa always said a smart man knows when to ask for help. Zara hugged her son tightly. Your father would be so proud of you, Thomas, and so am I. Later that night, with the children asleep in their new rooms and the celebration ended, Mason carried Zara across the threshold of their bedroom. As he set her down, she noticed changes to the room: new curtains, a larger bed, a vase of wildflowers on the dresser. Mrs. Caldwell helped, he explained, seeing her surprise. Wanted it to feel like your space too, not just mine. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. It's perfect. As Mason drew her into his arms, Zara felt the last of her reservations melting away. This was right. This was where they belonged. The first months of marriage brought adjustments for all of them. Mason was used to his independence, to making decisions without consultation. Zara was accustomed to running her household her way. The children tested boundaries, especially Thomas, who sometimes resented Mason's authority while simultaneously seeking his approval. There were arguments about discipline, about chores, about the distance to school now that they lived on the ranch. But there was laughter too, and gradually they found their rhythm as a family. Emma took to ranch life like she'd been born to it, following Mason around, learning the names of all the animals, begging to help with even the messiest chores. The pony Mason gave her for her 7th birthday became her constant companion. Thomas was more reserved, but his interest in ranching was genuine. He absorbed Mason's teachings about cattle, horses, and the land with quiet intensity. Mason never pushed, letting the boy set the pace of their relationship, offering guidance when asked but giving Thomas space when needed. One evening in late summer, as Mason was checking the property before nightfall, he found Thomas sitting on the fence of the corral, watching the horses. "Mind if I join you?" Mason asked, echoing their conversation from the barn. Thomas nodded, and Mason hoisted himself up to sit beside him. "Something on your mind, son?" Thomas kicked his heels against the fence post. "School starts again next week." "That it does, looking forward to it." A shrug. "I guess. Billy says I talk different now." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Different how? Like you?" "He says I sound like a rancher now, not a city boy." Mason hid a smile. "Is that a bad thing?" "No." Thomas hesitated. "Mason, can I ask you something important? Anything?" "When you marry someone with kids, do they become your kids too? For real?" Mason chose his words carefully. "Legally, yes, but what matters more is here." He tapped his chest. "In your heart. And in your heart, are we your kids, me and Emma?" "Yes," Mason said simply. "From the first moment I saw you standing beside your mama in that saloon, trying to look tough even though you were scared. I admired your courage then, and I admire the young man you're becoming now." Thomas absorbed this. "The other kids might tease me when school starts, about having a new pa." "Probably. Kids can be cruel sometimes." "What should I do?" Mason considered. "You could tell them that you're lucky. You had one good father who loved you, and now you have another one who does too. Not many people get that in life." Thomas turned this idea over in his mind. "Would my real pa be mad if I started calling you pa too? Not all the time maybe, just sometimes." Mason's throat tightened with emotion. "No, Thomas, I think he'd understand that hearts have room for more than one kind of love." Thomas nodded decisively. "Then I think I will. Sometimes." He hopped down from the fence. "I'm going to help Emma feed her pony before dinner." As Mason watched him go, pride swelled in his chest. The boy was navigating a complex emotional journey with remarkable wisdom for his age. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Mason was confident they would face them together, as a family. The years passed in the rhythms of ranch life. There were good seasons and bad drought years when the cattle grew thin and money was tight, rainy springs when the land flourished and the herd increased. Through it all, the bond between Mason and his adopted children strengthened. Emma grew into a spirited young woman with her mother's honey-colored hair and a fearlessness that both delighted and terrified her parents. By 15, she could ride as well as any ranch hand and had a head for business that impressed even the most skeptical cattlemen. Thomas, now 17, had grown tall and broad-shouldered, resembling Mason more than his biological father in mannerisms and build. He was Mason's right hand on the ranch, respected by the workers and trusted with increasing responsibility. And in the spring of 1880, Zara gave birth to a son they named James, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Rose. The family was complete, 2 children of the heart and 2 of the blood, though no distinction was ever made between them. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Mason surprised Zara with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the ranch in Thomas's capable hands. It was the first time they had been away alone together, and they reveled in the freedom and luxury of the growing city. On their last night, as they stood on the balcony of their hotel room overlooking the bay, Mason wrapped his arms around Zara from behind. "Any regrets, Mrs. Irwin?" He murmured against her ear. Zara leaned back into his embrace. "Not a single one, only that I didn't know you sooner." She turned in his arms to face him. "Remember what you said to me that day in the saloon, when I was so desperate and afraid?" Mason shook his head. "Can't say that I do." "You said Mrs. Peterson needed help with bookkeeping. It wasn't much, but it was hope when I needed it most." Mason's eyes crinkled. "And here I thought my rugged charm won you over." Zara laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. "That came later, but that small kindness. That was the beginning." As they sailed home to their family and the life they had built together, Zara thought about the long journey from that rainy day in Willow Creek. She remembered the frightened widow she had been, clutching her children's hands like lifelines. She thought of Thomas's resistance and eventual acceptance, of Emma's immediate embrace of Mason, of the family they had become. "My kids don't need another stranger," Mason had said once, when Zara suggested hiring a tutor for the children. "Then I'll be family," she had whispered, taking the lesson books herself. It had become their private joke over the years, a reminder of how far they had come from strangers to family. How love could grow in the most unexpected places, taking root in the harshest conditions and flourishing against all odds, like wildflowers in the desert after rain.